Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
But for those who are with us right now, if I could just get your attention and your help to just join us in looking at preparing for the webinar. We'll be using interactive elements through the way. So if you'd like to, have your mobile device on hand ready, just scan the QR code if you'd like, or if you could go to menti.com in a separate tab on your desktop. We'd love to hear your answers later, or your responses to some of our questions. My name is Tim. Some of you might have received emails from me already with respect to this webinar. I'm the Insight Sales and Engagement Partnership Specialist at GP Strategies. So it's been a pleasure engaging all of you through email. Some of you might have heard me already if you joined early. So really happy to have you with us today. Just some housekeeping details, of course, before we begin. This is a recorded event, and we'd just like you to know that for your own notice. It is all interactive webinar. So if I can direct you to the chat function on your Zoom window, if you just hover over your Zoom window, your navigation bar should pop up and just hit that chat button. Right, we love for you to be interacting with our speaker at any time and to be interacting with everyone else in the webinar as well. So just make sure that your send button is not just to the panelists and the host, but to everyone in the room, so we can share those great ideas. Last of all, being an interactive webinar, we really hope to elicit your responses on some of the things that Ben will be sharing about today. So if meter ready, awesome. If not, don't worry, I'm sure Ben will get later on. And just a little bit about Ben, who's our speaker for today. Ben is the Senior Director for Learning Solutions in APAC, and he heads and Australia. Ben's an amazing person, really. I've had the opportunity to sit in with him for some of the design pieces that we've done for learning. He's a wonderful learning architect. So without further ado, Ben, I'm just going to hand the time over to you so we can get started on Learning Trends for 2023.
Thank you, Tim. Greatly appreciated. Let me just quickly get my screen shared and make sure that we've got everything set up. Excellent. All right, so guys, let's jump in. Welcome to our annual Learning Trends webinar for 2023. This is the third time we have ran the Learning Trends webinar specifically for APAC. GP has been running the Global Learning Trends webinar and associated report for a number of years now. And I think that it's good that we have it in APAC, A, because we don't have to get up at 4 a.m. for it, but B, the learning trends in the Asia Pacific region, and to be honest, from country to country, can be really, really different. So this list is a little bit different to the global list. And we've also had some very recent events occur that warranted being included in the learning trends for 2023. So this year is all about cultivating connection, alignment, and efficiency, right? Because we've been already going through this trajectory since many years before COVID. But through COVID, I know a lot of organizations, including our own, has been through a great deal of change. And so, it'll be interesting to see what those trends are for this year. As Tim mentioned, you do have a chance to log in to our menti.com. And you should see that on your screen now. So far, I can see 25 of you have signed on. I'm not satisfied with that, if I'm perfectly honest. I've just got it on the screen. You can scan the QR code on your phone. You can manually go to menti.com and type it into another browser window. It's totally up to you, but there are 70 of us on so far and probably more to come. I want to see that number shoot up because, I want to get the statistical read on this group as we ask some of the questions. So yeah, so there will be some interactions on Menti, and I will bring up these instructions in case you miss it. So don't despair; you will get a chance to connect if you didn't get it right now. So let's jump in to Menti. So please log in, and we're going to start with our first question, just to make sure you've kind of got it loaded properly. It's just a test. I'm going to ask you a question, which is, where are you in the world today? Now, I've only got Asia Pacific highlighted here. Eventually, I'm going to have to roll this around and include Middle East and Africa because Under GP strategies, we are Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa now. We're all coming in together. So please drop a pin and just touch the screen and tell us where you are. We got some people down in, it looks like, Victoria, Australia, some folks up in China, some folks in Indonesia. There's someone floating off in space, which I presume means they're in one of the countries that isn't there. There's someone in a deep trench out in the Indian Ocean, which is a fascinating place to live. I'd love to hear more about that. Some folks over in maybe India or Sri Lanka, up in Japan, which is really cool. I think I'm seeing like Shanghai and Beijing come up there, maybe Hong Kong, Thailand, I'm seeing Singapore, Malaysia. So this is really good. Just keep on going, guys. 32 of you responded. This is really just practicing, making sure everyone is on and feeling comfortable with how to use Menti. Because straight after this, we're going to do another activity. So I'm going to jump across to it right now. And that activity is really before I share our top learning trends for 2023. Gosh, I keep on having to remember that I blinked and it's now March. I would like us to now have a look at your learning trends. So you can enter up to 2. You can enter up to 2 learning trends in here, right? So what for you personally, for your organization, what are your learning trends? Go ahead and let's see what emerges on the screen here. Okay, straight away, the first response from someone is blended and virtual. Mechanical. Whoever wrote mechanical, tell me in the chat what you're referring to there. Onboarding, 70, 20, 10, the forever split we're all chasing in learning. Agility is coming across. Virtual and micro learning. The bigger the word, the more prevalent that word is. So keep on coming, guys. 22 of you have responded. See this word cloud grow. AA1806. I think that's someone's username, but still fascinating learner trend nonetheless. Let's see, flexible, transform, in person. Interesting. We have something relating to in person in here. That's really fascinating. I can see train the trainers coming up. Personalized is coming up. Big words so far are still blended, hybrid, virtual, digital. Leadership and onboarding. Oh, Chat GPT. Right? If this was a horse race, I'd be, Chat GPT shooting up from the rear. Excellent. So 43 of you responded. I'm still going to leave this up a little bit longer. Yeah, AI and Chat GPT. Faha in the chat has said TikTok. Yeah, trend towards TikTok. We could zoom that out and kind of refer to TikTok. Just that mindset of what it's like to use TikTok in other modalities, right? Quick, short bursts, user-generated, social, peer-to-peer, right? There's a lot of elements of TikTok that are emerging in learning and becoming stronger. So we've got 48 responses. A few more can come in, but look, some of these are aligned to the ones that we're going to talk about today. Some of them look like they're very industry specific. I'm very glad I see talent, leadership coming up a lot. Interesting around flow of work, really interesting to see that. But the big words, micro learning, agility, Chat GPT, virtual, blended, digital, right? These are the themes, right? Now, whether or not this is what you're doing day to day, where your budget is going, where your time is going, the way your learners are interacting with learning remains to be seen. But really, thank you very much for sharing that. Now, I'd like to share what our learning trends are for today. Oh, sorry, whoops. So number 1, live versus digital, where and when. So a big trend that we're seeing also that's emerging through trainingindustry.com, who we collaborate with on this research, but I'm seeing this a lot, and I think it came up a little bit on the word cloud we just had is, are we rushing back to live? What are we doing with digital? But live versus digital, where and when in the kind of so-called post-COVID world. Career at scale is evolving the role of learning, right? So we're going to deep dive into career and its interconnection with L&D. Optimizing your learning ecosystem is really an evergreen. Expanding the organizational learning boundaries. We're going to deep dive into what that means and why that's such an important trend for us to discuss. Exploring the metaverse. The metaverse is Some would say it's flopping, some would say it's a little bit early, but preparing for AI and learning. And lastly, putting all that together and kind of there's a refinement around design thinking, agile, and development of minimum viable products as you try to bring all of this together. Yes, we will be sharing the slides, Derek. Thanks for your question. So these are the ones we'll be delving into today, the 7 trends, but there are some honorable mentions, right? A lot of these are here every year, right? But we can't focus on them every year. But upskilling and reskilling, there's still a lot of urgency around that. There's still a lot of head scratching around how do I do that at scale? How do I make sure I've got a workforce that is ready for the changes that AI, digitization, automation are bringing about? Micro learning and gamification, again, you guys said that. That's an evergreen, but it's definitely a learning trend. Hybrid learning, you guys said that, an evergreen. We're going to be touching on it, I guess, through the lens of live versus digital. Data-driven learning, right? And this kind of ties into AI, ties into personalization. It ties into a few other layers, ties into business decisions and business analytics. Skills-based personalization. I was very tempted. This is in the top trends as well, but it is something we focused on in prior years. But you know how the push towards a learning ecosystem that's aligned to people's skills and that adapts to people's growth and development. Culture. You know, with everything that's been going on over the last 3+ years, there's a resurgence and extra pressure on L&D teams right now to kind of reestablish what is the culture of our company. We got to get that out there. There's an opportunity here to really assert that, and we will be touching on that a little bit around career, but it is a big theme that's coming up. Learning in the flow of work and evergreen topic. It came up in some of the responses in the word cloud, and user-generated content. You know, I'd say this is collectively a lot of the themes that we're seeing in learning. But let's jump into our first ones. And I want to start with a quote by Carol Dweck. Becoming is better than being. Anyone can tell me in the chat, what is Carol Dweck most famous for? Yeah, growth mindset, fixed mindset, developing more of a growth mindset. You know, I think this is probably a great theme for us in 2023. You know, we've had this period of continuous change. And just from my own experience, you know, a lot of customers is like, oh, we can go back to the way it was before. That's one type of narrative I hear. Another narrative I hear is, okay, we've evolved, we're there, we've arrived, as if that there's some sort of end point in this destination, right? But the truth is L&D is always becoming. It's not being, and then more so than ever, there's an urgency to make sure we're always growing and changing. And so I really love that quote, and I think it kind of underpins some of the themes here, especially our first trend, which is live versus digital. Where and when. I love this quote from Benjamin Franklin. It just came to me while I was kind of coming up with this slide deck. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I learn. Right? And so really the question with live versus digital is everyone wants it. Why do they want it? Should we be going back to it? If so, how much? If so, when? So before we jump into that question, I'd like to actually do another little poll in Menti, which is, you know, what is the state of Menti for you? Sorry, not of Menti, of live training for you. And by live, I mean classroom, but I also mean virtual. So it's back, baby, and we're all in. COVID didn't really change us much. We're going even more digital. We're still on the fence figuring it out, and we're happy with where we've landed. Where is your mindset at with regards to kind of the balance of live and digital and the use of live? Interested to hear from you. So we've got 6 responses in. Let's keep them going. And by the way, these sentiments are from the conversations we're having worldwide with customers, right? So all of these are things we're hearing from customers in different forms. We're going even more digital. So far is shot to the top. Still on the fence, figuring out totally understandable position. It's back, baby, and we're all in. Is a big push. There's a lot of requests, you know, coming in for us to say, hey, you know, whether or not it's the learning needs it, the people want it. The people want to get together again. The people want to be together. The people want to be in a room. You know, so some of it's being driven, I think, by just that lack of human connection we've had. But there's also always a need for live, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. So we've got 45 responses here. That's a pretty good statistical balance of the group. Yeah, so number one, we're going even more digital. So even though COVID is wrapped, not wrapped, but we're in this kind of new state. We're all back at work, whether it's from home or otherwise. But we're in this kind of new normal, and we've been in it probably for a little while now. There's a push to go more digital, but there's still a place for live training, and I really want to jump into that. So some finer points around this learning trend. Number one, classroom, whether it's live or virtual, it always has a big role to play. And by that, I mean, there are some things that are just done well with a live audience. And I don't just mean the fact that there's a facilitator. I mean that there's the fact that I'm with my peers and I can collaborate. Now, anyone who works with GP on some of our modern learning experiences, I know some of you are on here, will know that there are some ways to bring classroom level interaction into a digital space, right? There are platforms out there that are very good at doing cohort driven social learning. But ultimately, we've got to be aware of the strengths and limitations of live training. What is it really good for? So can you guys tell me in a chat, what, in your opinion, are the best uses if you only had $1 million and a certain fraction of that was going to be spent on live training, but you couldn't spend it all? Like, what would you really use it for? If you had to be super prescriptive, how would you deploy live training? What is it? How do you get the most out of live training? Okay, Bin Shu has said simulations, absolutely. Role play simulations and assessments. Yeah, thank you, Robert. Yeah, some sort of interactions from Davey. Daria said lots more hands-on needed. So maybe when it's super complex and it needs that direct touch, practical application, experiential sessions, being able to observe. Yeah, so like presentation skills, for example. You've really got to keep an eye on things as an example of that. So thank you, Kathleen. Practical interaction skills, application, socialization, more comfortable for less tech savvy generation. Yeah, okay, that's true. Deeper connection. So I think you guys have called a lot of this good stuff out. Team building, thank you. That's another one we hear about a lot. I think the key part here so I'm seeing limitations, by the way, come out here as well, right? You have to be forced to set time aside, right? So there are limitations as well, but I like some of these strengths. And one of the things that sets these strengths that brings them together is the opportunity to practice something and have immediate feedback, right? Anything where I need to observe it and get immediate feedback, that is a very powerful place a powerful thing to achieve in classroom training. Anytime where I need active, agile discussion, very great to do it in the classroom. Can I do these things digitally? Absolutely, you can. You've got Mural for collaborative problem solving. You've got we use Intrepid for bringing discussions online. And you also now have video tools where I can record myself doing something and I can get feedback from an AI as well as from a human. So there are ways to make it all happen, right? But there are some things that are just sometimes a bit easier, in some ways even a little bit more cost effective, unless you're doing it at scale to do it in a classroom. But there are limitations. There are definitely limitations. And I'd say one of the biggest limitations is, of course, yes, time. Right, the cost of venue bookings, but time would be a big one, pulling people off the job. I think we'd all agree that we're all significantly busier now with a more lean workforces across every industry that I come across, including my own, right? Everyone's crazy busy and it's very hard to find time to get out and into a training room for a meaningful chunk of time. But the other limitations really are fundamental to L&D. Anyone who's been on my prior webinars will know that I have a problem with the term L&D, or learning and development. I feel like it's a misnomer and it misguides or misdirects our energy and attention. I don't know. I feel like asking, does anyone know what my preferred 2 words are? But I won't put anyone on the spot on that. But my preferred 2 words are retention and transfer. I think we should be the R&T team, not the L&D team, because who cares if someone, just like that quote earlier from Benjamin Franklin, right? Who cares if people learned something in that one day? What matters is if they've retained it over time and have they transferred that to various applications in their role. That's really the only reason why any form of learning should exist. It's the only reason why we should spend money on it. And so the problem with classroom or live training is that you have two cognitive issues going on. One is cognitive load, meaning the human mind can only retain so much at any given time. And number two, that the forget curve, right? People forget things within 24 hours, they've forgotten 40 to 60%, right? And after 7 days, 90%. So we really need to, this is why hybrid was a great word I saw come up. We really need to be being very selective about how we use and be clear on what ROI we're trying to achieve. Because classroom training, live training, virtual training by itself is just not that effective in embedding learning long-term because of those cognitive challenges that we all have as human beings. So yeah, when we are deploying it, we want to be making sure we're getting ROI. I want to use classroom here because if I don't do it, then I'm not going to get the value from this learning. We've also got to blend in and make sure that we're supporting that virtual training, maybe some pre-learn or some activities in a build up to it, building some community before they come into the room so people know each other. And then after the session, missions, projects, activities that are gamified, that drive people to actually apply what they've learned in any given live experience. So the word blend is really important. It's not a mix. It's not like a salad where I can pick and choose bits and pieces of it and ignore the ones I don't like. The classroom bit, the digital bit, the social discussion bit, the on-the-job bit, all of that needs to be equally important. You have to be able to drink it in as one object. If I treat it as multiple objects, then learners start to become selective. I don't need to do the pre-work. I can just turn up to the classroom session. I don't need to do this because no one's looking at it, right? And that's kind of the world of learning we've come from, but now we don't have to deal with that. We've got to learn lessons from digital to uplift our live training. And so what we're really getting out of this is that in order to make self-directed digital learning work, you have to really push yourself to emphasize the why of the learning. It has to be ruthlessly relevant. It has to be ultra engaging. The content has to be super connected to me and my job. Otherwise, I'm not going to participate. Right? Whereas with live training, we can sometimes almost be lazy about it because you've got them in the room. They're a captive audience. You've got a trainer there. And a lot of trainings get by based on how funny and humorous the trainer is, how comfortable they are, on the podium, and also how good the food was, right? I mean, the number one feedback you see at the end of a happy sheet is the lunch was poor. The air conditioning was too cold, right? But if we can learn lessons, edutainment, thank you, Bill, yeah. And so if we can learn lessons from the effort that has to go into uplifting digital and say, you know what, that still applies to live, we're going to get more effective live training. So trend number 2, career at scale is evolving the role of learning. So Bill Gates says, success today requires the agility to drive and constantly rethink, reinvigorate, react, and reinvent. We've all heard of the Great Resignation. Can anyone tell me in the chat the other expression or description of what's going on with resignations now in the chat? Begins with Q. I've heard it a lot. Thank you, Mavis. Yeah, Tim, quiet quitting. Yeah, so silent quitting. Yeah, so quiet quitting, silent quitting. Career is in turmoil, whether or not you're an organization. I know many Asian organizations, like for example, in Japan, in Singapore, have traditionally very low turnover, especially in certain industries and institutions, right? But people this has jolted people. People are raising questions. And so it's important we talk about that. In fact, this is so important that we're refreshing our research. We last did the research in 2019 for our career research, the state of career. We're refreshing it right now, and we'll be releasing a report and comparing pre and post COVID data on the way that managers and individuals are thinking about career. So I haven't seen the results of that yet, but we've had very strong responses in APAC. So we'll be able to provide APAC specific data, which I'm really excited about. So here are some points that I want to raise though. Career is still between a manager and a team member in terms of the majority of where the work effort resides. Of course, companies got to support it, create structures and, do the right promotions and talent development and whatnot. But ultimately, it's that bridge between those two parties. However, for both parties, the definition of career needs to change. If both parties are sitting there, and this is probably true in some other markets than others, but if the definition of career is promotion, it's pay rise, it's the next job, right? and you're working in an increasingly flat organization, or an organization where there hasn't been a lot of turnover traditionally for many years in the management level population, then that's an unfair definition of career. The definition of career needs to be now, right? Right now, your first and most immediate opportunity for career development is now in your current job. And if managers and individuals don't get that, then the nature of their career conversations are not going to be effective. Because it's not just promotion. What it is there's an urgency from disruption, change, reskilling, upskilling, automation, digitization, all of these things. We need to get our entire workforce being agile learners, and they need to equate learning with their career, and they need to be doing it daily, weekly, monthly, not it's some special event that gets prescribed to me by HR or by my manager. So all those definitions need to change. And before I bring up that definition is creating that need to be scalable, and it's helping it overlap and influence and come into the L&D scope. Quiet quitting, great resignation means reliance on managers alone isn't enough, because you know who cares about career? The ones who are in the middle of their career, the individual. Individuals care more about their career than managers. And so we have to really be starting to empower individuals to change their mindset, individuals to have a conversation with their manager, individuals to develop learning agility and a curious mind, and make sure and realize there's career risks at not developing those things. So that's the shift. That's what requires the scale, right? We are running less and less career conversation trainings for managers, and more your career training programs for individual contributors. And then it's L&D who are responsible for trying to roll that out and trying to figure out how to do that at scale. So that's really the main themes. And the last one here is, this upskilling and reskilling. It's this combination of all of these bullet points that is creating that scale, and that the fact that it's now intertwined with L&D, because it's not just a promotion or an annual review, it is reskilling, it's upskilling, and it's stuff that L&D are responsible for. So that's why it's getting further and further in the target of L&D, and we're seeing talent and L&D overlap more and more. So that's trend number 2. Trend number 3, optimizing your learning ecosystem. So what would you, just tell me in the chat, what would you guys say is the most common piece of technology in, a middle to large enterprise learning ecosystem? What's the most common platform / technology that most of us would have? Teams, yeah, okay, fine, but I'm going to call that not necessarily a learning tool, though it can be. It's a collaboration tool. Yeah, I'd say we all have an LMS, right? Whether it's, something related to Cornerstone or Saba or Success Factors or something, a Moodle type implementation. Increasingly, we're seeing LXPs, right, become super relevant. And we're also getting, aggregators and curators coming in, right? You've got the Degrees of the world. We're getting people kind of flipping a switch on things like LinkedIn Learning or Udemy, or Go1, and these platforms that are really kind of MOOC content libraries. And so what's happening is, and what has been happening over the last, well, honestly, more than COVID, but accelerating through COVID, there's a push towards learning technologies. And many of us now have a much more complex learning ecosystem than we did, 1, 2, 3 years ago. But how do you optimize it? I'm not here to sell a technology or do anything, but I will say that often technology providers can tend to say, yeah, we do that, we do that, we do that. And then when it comes to actually living with it for the next few years, it takes time to figure out what it really can do and what it can't do. And so really there's a layering for it. But what are the key kind of learning points that we have, the key finer points about optimizing the ecosystem? So we need a shorter time to productivity. People can't join the job and spend 6 to 12 months kind of getting to good, but also that applies to deploying a technology. You can't deploy your technology or your technology stack, and it takes a long time for your organization to get value from that technology stack. So everything needs to be quicker in terms of getting to good and getting to productive. We can, through optimizing our ecosystem, we can increase retention and engagement. right? But again, it takes foresight and thinking. And a lot of conversations around technology tend to be a little bit siloed. There's a very specific problem we're trying to solve. And so you end up with a very specific technology, but then you realize later that there's these 10 other problems that need to be solved, but you're kind of stuck with it, right? And so GP finds itself in a position where it's like, we have X, A, and Y technologies, and we want to achieve this goal. Can you bring them together somehow and make an experience, or figure out how we can do it, or tell us what's missing? What are the missing ingredients? You guys and I mentioned the whole push for upskilling, and so the push around personalization of my own skills assigned to roles and job categories. So as I progress and learn, the platform will automatically adapt and adjust. So that's going to be really powerful for organizations as we move towards future skills. How do we actually track and feed learners as we drive that curiosity in them, and as they do upskill and progress? There has to be that layer of personalization to get there. Are you optimizing your ecosystem to make that happen? Reduce content cost. So that's a really interesting one. And AI in content creation is something we're going to talk about as the last element here. But there are opportunities to reduce content cost, and I'd like to divide that into two sections, right? Some of it might be, okay, I'm going to invest in a learning content platform like LinkedIn Learning, and per head, the cost is actually quite reasonable, right? That is one way to attack it, but I'd say that's not optimized. Another way to attack it is, yeah, I might have a higher upfront cost to build something bespoke for my company that's very relevant to my learners. And that might feel costly, but in the end, the per person cost, because I can roll it out at scale now, is actually much lower, right? When I look at that content cost. So content cost comes through designing and building learning that is more scalable than it was before, but also in terms of tapping into and curating from existing content that's out there. The key driver for both of those is in optimization is finding ways to link it all together to make the learner experience seamless, but also to be able to drive ruthless relevance. No matter how much you spend on your content, $1 or $1 million, if it's not ruthlessly relevant to my job, people will not click on it, especially in a self-directed environment. Ben Schuer said, language is a challenge for a platform like LinkedIn. Absolutely. There are challenges in multiple platforms around language. Some content is translated, some content isn't. And so I think the world of the Udemy's and LinkedIn Learning and Go Ones of the world, they have a place in a learning ecosystem, but they're not the silver bullet to just flip the switch and say, ta-da, we've achieved our training hours for every individual by giving them this, because just because you've built it doesn't mean they will come. And I think I've ran at least 2 webinars on that whole concept, subject before. So increased communication and knowledge sharing between departments, between divisions, but especially from L&D on how to get the most from the platforms. So what I would say there is building change management and adoption into your learning activities to then further drive adoption of the technology is important. So maybe I might start a training program in a traditional sense with a kickoff and just talk about the content. But because I know I'm trying to drive utilization of this technology and help people get the most out of it, I might build in extra activities that drive people to that technology and drive adoption of that technology. So adoption is now a part of learning design, so we can bridge that gap of utilization. A deeper connection for hybrid organizations. So some organizations are going back. I know in Australia, there's a couple of banks that are threatening people to basically be in the office or don't have a job, but many of us are still working in a hybrid fashion, right? So how can we make sure that even though we are remote, even though we are separate, how can we tap into technology, optimize that technology to bridge that gap and to build that connection? Fewer clicks. This is a personal pain point of mine. If I have, let's say I have LinkedIn Learning. Here's a question for the chat. Let's say I have LinkedIn Learning. Let's say I have Success Factors. Let's say I have, Degreed. Let's say I have those 3 platforms. What do I need? What are some strategies? And there's one major strategy that I should deploy in order to reduce the number of clicks to get to relevant content. What do you guys think? It's all there. How do I reduce the clicks to get there for the learner? Interesting to hear what people think. Well, curation is a way, right? But you need a creation tool. So Degreed could act as that curation tool if you've set it up properly and done a robust skills mapping. It's actually a simple integration thing. Here we're talking about single sign-on, right? So some organizations find themselves in a position where some technologies sit inside the single sign-on ecosystem and other technologies sit outside the single sign-on ecosystem. If you're really going to get the most of your technology stack, so in that case, we're talking about SuccessFactors as an LMS, we were talking about Degreed as a content curation platform, and LinkedIn Learning as a MOOC content library, right? If I'm really going to get the most out of those three, and all three of them aren't on single sign-on, then I'm not going to be able to deep link. I'm not going to be able to create a training program here, then it automatically links me into another platform. So single sign-on is super important if you really want to create the learner experience that makes content easy, right? But in terms of relevance, right, I think William and Mings have said made very good points about curation and personalization, right? That's probably the other layer. At least it's helping look out into what's out there and point it to me. I think Jane said system integration. Oh, sorry, Jane, I almost missed it. You did say it, so I apologize, Jane, for missing that. Yeah, SSO, but it doesn't really work as well as it should. Well, we'd have to have a look at that, right? A good SSO integration with good API in the back end should be seamless. So, there's always a conversation to why that integration isn't working the way it should. Like GP's integration with 4 different technologies in our stack is seamless, right? So it's something we need to look at. But if the technologies in your stack weren't the best choice in the first place, like say LinkedIn Learning language issues, right? That's going to create problems that even single sign-on can't handle. And interestingly, increased enablement for meaningful coaching and mentoring. So something that's emerging in technology ecosystems is matching activities. Let's call it the Tinder of coaching and mentoring, where you can have both a network of external coaches that automatically do skill, chemistry, and background checks to link individuals up with coaches, and they can generate coaching, can track coaching, but also you can create it for an internal coach and mentor network that links people up and promotes and drives coaching and mentoring, right? And so this is an increasingly important layer in a technology stack that, to be frank, just isn't addressed in an LXP, an LMS, a curation platform, or anything like that, right? And so this is that coming back to earlier on, how do I create connection when it's digital? So jumping ahead here to trend number 4, expanding the organizational learning boundaries. So we're really coming to talk a little bit about open source here. So when I say organizational learning boundaries, really what we've already been talking about it through these trends. So what is learning responsible for? Where can learning come from? What does constitute learning and what doesn't constitute learning? When I run learning sessions for people, when people are first joining a hybrid or a digital first learning experience, I often run a poll with learners. So I've literally had hundreds of people respond to this poll. And I ask the learner, what was the last learning experience you had in your job? What do you think the most common response is? Tell me in the chat. What was the last learning experience you had in your job? Well, yeah, it could be onboarding, training, but generally speaking, it is I've attended. Yeah, it's more like the modality of learning, right? I attended an e-learning or I attended a classroom training, right? Other options I give them, and so Wendy's mentioned on-the-job training. I give that as an option in the poll. I give them learning every day at work. I give them looked up something on online or on YouTube or whatever. I give them all these other options, but the reality is most learners in a corporate context outside of work, they're very agile learners. Whether it's 18 or 70, people just know how to search for things and know how to find things when they need it and know how to look it up, right? They know, Kathleen said researching, right? They know how to do that in their daily lives. The amount of times The amount of time people put into researching how to make a cake or how to fix something or what car they're going to buy, it's astronomical. But you throw someone in, you tell them this is your job, and all of a sudden, all those skills for learning disappear, right? And part of it is because we've grown up in this experience of learning being directive, especially in organizations that it's top down. I'm told what to learn and when to learn. And so it's not expanding the organizational learning boundaries isn't just about L&D practitioners and learning organizations looking at expanding. It's also about changing the mindsets of your learners, because if their mindset is stuck, then that's another barrier to adoption. It's another barrier to shifting to a better way. And so, this is a very broad topic that covers all sorts of areas. We already spoke about, aligning with, looking at open source technologies to open up the power of customization, integration of technologies. We've spoken about looking at curating from different sources, some known, some unknown. But the big one here is user-generated content, right? Where is this content come from? Think about your traditional learning academies, right? You might have an academy for compliance, for banking, for sales, or whatever it may be. But where is the content coming from? It's usually coming from one or two people, some SMEs, some senior SMEs, right? But actually, there's a lot of great information out there that can really help reduce the cost of content creation, that can make sure it's ruthlessly relevant because it's coming from your learners. But what that means is, instead of the L&D team spending time on sourcing learning and vetting vendor content and doing all of that work, they are now vetting and making sure that there's the quality coming in from their learner population. So it's not necessarily going to save time. It's a shift of energy. I was doing this, but now I'm doing that, right? So organizational boundaries extends to where we're getting content, how we think about our technology, how we think about where subject matter expertise comes from, and how that informs the structure of our learning academies internally. Number 5 is exploring the metaverse. So I've got a little poll here for you guys. I want to ask this question. What is the current state with the metaverse for you? I still don't get it. We're exploring but haven't produced anything. We've had some deployments. I get it, but I'm not convinced, and we're all over it. I'm curious to see. We've got 12 responses so far. For that one person who said we've had some deployments, I don't know if you could tell me in the chat, how did it go? What were the results? If you could share a little bit about it, that would be fascinating. So we've had 35 responses so far, and what we're seeing is a trend towards, I don't get it, right? I don't get it, right? And I think you saw the reaction to the Meta's last launch or update of the metaverse, and how lukewarm the reaction was to it. So Obinshi said we had an onboarding session last year. Maybe we could, and it goes great. Yeah. So here's what the thing: Meta, the company, and Metaverse are not interconnected. Meta has decided to call themselves that, and they are going, or have been investing big on the metaverse. But the metaverse, the concept of it has been around for a long, long time. And there are powerful use cases for it, right? So here we had an onboarding for a metaverse where people with virtual remote could come and connect. Maybe Binshu, we could connect, and I'd love to hear more about it. And you could share and present that to this wider L&D community. Something we've been using it for is around safety training, right? So bringing people together in AR or VR environments to be able to collaborate around how to handle different situations. For example, how do I deal with fire safety on a ship, right? The ships are out at sea. Connectivity is poor out there. Any data that does come through is very costly, and so it can't just be streamed in. So this concept of the metaverse can be very powerful if developed right with the right use case. Similar to what I was talking about with live. There's a use case for this, but what it's about is creating interaction in environments that wouldn't be possible in the real world. That's the use case for Meta for now. I'm sure it's going to evolve more and more, and it's going to change more and more. But what are we thinking with the metaverse? I already mentioned the metaverse is not owned by a single entity, right? It is really a place to interact. It's very big or growing rapidly and technical. Interconnected digital world as a representation of the real world, people, places, concepts, events. We've been looking at, haven't deployed it yet, but looking at alumni communities in the metaverse. One of the big barriers for the metaverse is the technology that's required. That I need a XR or VR headset to really bring that to life. But if that technology is in your learning ecosystem, then there are other uses for it beyond that, and the added value of human connection in a digital space is hard to match. I'll jump down a little bit, and this is the point I was mentioning earlier: safe spaces for practice and failure. So another area for the metaverse that we've been having success in is in actually the power industry, power generation, building simulated to the individual button power plant control units, entire rooms, because these control stations for power stations can be massive, right? And can take different levels of resourcing to manage and operate them, right? So we can build those in a metaverse and people can collaborate from wherever they are. From a training standpoint, can run simulations and drills. So there are uses for it. We're still exploring it ourselves, but it can be valuable, right? So hopefully for those of you who said, I don't get it, I've given you a couple of ideas, very specific around technical and safety, but where it could be valuable. I could also imagine spaces for salespeople to collaborate, to share product information and knowledge. The hard part, like anything, will be driving adoption and getting the technology savvy up in those learners. We're coming to the end and we're going to have time for questions. And the last one, which is one I prepared a little bit late, right? Because of everything that went on from when Chat GPT launched. We've got to start preparing for AI in learning. Now, I've got this quote for Amit Ray, who is a leading AI scientist. As more and more artificial intelligence is entering the world, more and more emotional intelligence must enter into leadership. So this is a powerful quote because it also speaks back to why there's such a huge pressure on organizations for reskilling and upskilling, but not just reskilling and upskilling, focusing on social skills, thinking skills, emotional skills. Because as automation, AI, digitization take repetitive tasks away, or even take some more complex tasks away, like Chat GPT is threatening to do, what's left is the leadership, is the empathy, is the emotion. That's not there in AI yet. And so even before Chat GPT, the literature in the learning sciences field has already identified as second to programming and coding skills, social and emotional and cognitive skills are the second most important set of skills for the future. So a little interesting hook here, but just for fun, I'm going to give you a different quote. AI doesn't have to be evil to destroy humanity. If AI has a goal and humanity just happens to come in the way, it will destroy humanity as a matter of course without even thinking about it. No hard feelings. And that's Elon Musk. And I just thought that was a great, funny quote. So I didn't prepare too much for this. Thank you. I really love that quote. So there's also that possibility as well. Let's be honest. If you've been reading about the stuff that's been going on with Bing's AI chatbot and some of the weird stuff it's been saying, it's concerning. But what I decided to do is I engaged this morning, in a conversation with Chat GPT, and I asked it 3 questions in a series of a conversation. And so what I did is I took the text that it responded for each question, and I took out some of the bulk of it because it would have taken forever to move through. And then I uploaded it into an AI voice and face video. And for some reason, I put a New Zealand accent on it. I don't know why. Please forgive me and ignore me. So let's have a listen to see how this goes. So the first question I asked is, how will AI platforms like ChatGPT impact corporate learning? Let's hear what it said. And please tell me if the audio is working to my GPT.
AI platforms like ChatGPT have the potential to significantly impact corporate learning in a number of ways. Here are some potential ways. Personalized learning, increased accessibility, real-time feedback, improved engagement, and reduced costs. Overall, AI platforms have the potential to revolutionize corporate learning by making it more personalized, accessible, engaging, and cost-effective.
So that was the answer to the first question. Each of those bullet points that it went through that had more of a blurb on it, and I've captured and saved the conversation, and we will email it to everybody just for your own reference purposes. So after that, I asked a follow-up question.
AI platforms like Chat GPT have the potential to significantly
Sorry. And so because it listed all these things it can do, gamification, personalization, all that stuff, I said, can Chat GPT do all of that yet? Here was its response.
As an AI language model, I am capable of analyzing text and generating responses based on patterns in the data that I was trained on. While I can provide personalized responses to user inquiries and offer suggestions for further learning, I am not currently designed to provide full-scale corporate training. However, there are AI-based learning platforms available that can offer personalized learning experiences, real-time feedback, and interactive features, and can be customized to meet the specific needs of an organization. These platforms may use AI language models like me to provide natural language interactions, but they also incorporate other technologies such as machine learning algorithms, data analytics, and interactive interfaces to provide a comprehensive learning experience.
Okay, so I was like, okay, that's interesting. Look, I work in learning and development. How will this impact my job?
AI platforms like Chat GPT have the potential to impact your job in several ways. Here are some potential ways. 1. Changing job responsibilities. 2. Adapting to new technologies. 3. Increased collaborating with AI tools. And 4. L&D will need to engage in continuous learning. Overall, AI platforms have the potential to significantly impact the field of learning and development, but they are unlikely to replace human professionals entirely. Instead, they are more likely to augment and enhance the work that learning and development professionals do, enabling them to deliver more effective training programs and improve learning outcomes for employees.
So that was my conversation with ChatGPT. I just thought, instead of me trying to figure out what the situation is with AI and learning, let's just ask the source. And I know it's pretty scary for me to refer to ChatGPT as the source, but I thought those answers were very thorough and very concrete. It aligns to our finer points that we had developed before I had that conversation. So what's going on with AI and learning? Well, first of all, power to the user, for the user, based on the user. If you've used ChatGPT, you understand what I'm saying. You can literally ask it anything, and it comes up. There are platforms like Fuse Universal who don't use an AI-driven chat, but they integrate your organization's learning into Google. So when I do a Google search, it searches and brings up as if it's, Google search results first, the results on your platform, right? So that ability to search and that ability to just grab that information myself, it's going to empower users, right? And ChatGPT and things like that, platforms like that, are just a next level. It's coming, and we already have the muscle memory for us to do that in the way that we Google and search for things anyway. So I've already mentioned search. It's going to really empower our learners in the flow of work. I'm talking to a number of organizations about how can we get people, when they have that question, they hit that moment of learning need where they've forgotten something, or they need to apply it in a new context, or whatever it may be. We can support them with that. But where AI isn't there yet is that first moment of learning need where I need to experience it and collaborate with others, and I need to go and practice it. It's not there yet, but trust me, it's coming, and are already pretty powerful video tools that can vet and assess what I'm working on. Capacity for true personalization over time, right? There are AI platforms such as Rhapsody by Area 9 that track and your competence over time, and your level of conscious or unconscious competence, and it adapts and adjusts your learning journey for you, right? So that's already in flow right now, but I think it's going to go up a significant degree. Human help isn't going anywhere. We already had that as our point. You heard ChatGPT say it. It must be true. Be careful what you feed it, right? If you feed it rubbish, if people interact with it, it's going to learn from that, and it might start producing rubbish. At this point, it's not smart enough to discern that just yet. Measurement and agility is still going to be critical, not just measurement of the learning, but measurement of the outcome specifically from any given AI, and then the agility to adapt and adjust how we work with that AI to meet those needs. That's true of all of our learning, still true here. But if you are looking at AI, and this is true of any technology, if GP could be in the middle of every conversation about we're thinking of deploying some technology, I would always stress that careful alignment between the learners, their needs, their time, their worries, their concerns, what's relevant to them, the business, its current state, its future state, its mission, vision, values, goals, and then what outcomes you want to achieve. All three of those need to be, equally assessed in order to make a decision about how and where to deploy AI or any technology for that matter. So to finish, our last trend, which is really just a pretty quick one, refining design thinking, agile development, and minimum viable product. If we're going to be trying to be quick and responsive on career, if we're going to figure out how to do better with hybrid learning, integration of live and digital blended experiences, if we're going to look at AI, if we're going to do any of these things that we've described, we really need to be able to employ the practice of getting to a minimum viable product. I don't think the skill set for design thinking, even though people have done courses on design thinking, I'm not convinced that it's there yet as a tool that I deploy naturally in the same way I might deploy a project management tool. It's still very conceptual for people, because when you're trying to solve problems, a lot of times we find that the conversation is more like this top row, right? I've already got the picture in my mind of what it should look like. And until it looks like that picture, I'm not going to be happy. But working with AI, working with new technologies, working with hybrid designs often means that it's going to be more of an iterative prototyping process, right? First, I got a skateboard. Yeah, okay, so I get it. We're moving in the right direction because we started with the right level of learner and business centricity. It evolved to be a scooter, it evolved to be a bike, it evolved to be a car, but maybe it ends up being an airplane, right? Or something completely different because our business has changed. But true design thinking and true agile development means that you have both the capacity and the tools to develop minimum viable products, test those minimum viable products before going large. And I'd really encourage you all, as you're talking to technology providers, to push them on minimum viable products as a way to test those platforms with small groups and get that data as well. But just remember, it's not a straight line to success. Things are going to change and it's going to evolve over time. So that's pretty much it for today, guys. There are 7 top learning trends. Live versus digital, where and when. This is the stuff people are working through all year. Career, the scale and requirement of investment and engagement in career is pulling learning L&D into career. The connection of career and reskilling and upskilling is pulling learning in. I said we're going to have some research coming out and some cool initiatives in the middle of the year. Please keep an eye out for that. I'm going to hand over to Tim in a second to speak about it. Optimizing your learning ecosystems. Yeah, you've got one. Is it optimized? How can you bring it together? Is it easy to use? Are you getting the most from it? Expanding organizational learning boundaries, the way you think about content, where content comes from, thinking about how to deploy technology. Increasing your knowledge of Metaverse. It's not going anywhere, and there are some genuine use case for it. AI, AI, which we just demoed, how kind of scary it is, but it's coming and it's supernatural and easy to use. So it's going to have a big impact on us. And I think it's going to hit in 2023. It might even come quicker than the Metaverse. And then finally, if we're going to be dealing with all of this, making sure you've got the ability, skills within your L&D team for design thinking, for agile development, and the capacity to build low cost, low risk, minimum viable products. So Tim, back to you, mate.
Right. Thanks so much, Ben. Just making sure my screen was being shared this time. Yeah, so I don't know about everyone. This was my first pass, full disclosure, at today's webinar. And as someone who enjoys learning, I think it's really, really exciting. What we might have lined up for us in 2023, I reckon some of it flows into 2024, especially if you're talking about technologies. But yeah, on that point of excitement, I do want to share with you what else we'll be having for the rest of the year, especially on that point to career, right? Our second trend and pulling that role of learning into career. First of all, in April, we'll be having we'll publish our career and leadership research report. That's something that we've been collecting data over since November last year to sometime in February. And yeah, we're gonna share insights on what career and leadership is to your people, especially in APAC. We've got this scoped for the globe as well as something specific to the region. If you're not keen on diving into that data and that insights and discussions yourself, we'll be having a webinar in June. exactly on that, and we'll be happy to walk through the findings of our research report. So keep your calendars open. We'll be overjoyed to have you with us in June. Last and definitely not least, in fact, the most, we'll be having our open course called Career Now. It's a social digital learning experience, right? Something where learners will, will experience over a course of time. In this program, we're helping really relate learning to these learners' career. We're going to equip them with the tools and the skills really to seize their career, to give them what they need to be accountable with their careers. So that's coming up sometime this year. Keep your calendars open. I'll definitely be in touch and we'd love to see you there. But of course, if you have any questions with regards to today's webinar, whether it's any of the trends that you've seen, any challenges that you have, or something totally unrelated to today's webinar that you just like to talk to us about, please feel free to drop me an email or send me a message over the phone, or just scan the QR code on the top right hand of your screen. That's going to bring you to a booking page, and we can just chat about learning in your organization.
This webinar is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can access more webinars or download additional resources at gpstrategies.com/resource-library.